Ever sit in your home studio and feel like your mix is fighting you every step of the way? You change one thing and then another, and before you know it, you're lost. It's not that you're bad at mixing, it's just that you're burning through mental energy on the wrong decisions. Here's the thing, humans make thousands of decisions a day, and as the day goes on, our brain gets tired, and that's called decision fatigue. And in the studio, it kills your perspective, it drains your confidence, and it locks you into habits that keep you stuck. To stop that happening, I'm going to show you 5 of those habits and exactly how to break them, so you can mix with more mental clarity and get better results faster and actually enjoy the process again. After spending hundreds of hours coaching home studio producers, I've found that this is one of the biggest confidence killers in mixing. You know that feeling where you think something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it? So you keep poking at it, sweeping around with EQ, trying a compressor, adding and undoing plugins, and somehow the more you do, the less sure you feel. Now, this is the loop that quietly drains hours from your session. You get locked into hunting for flaws that might not even exist and doubting every single fix you make. And I've seen this play out in my students with EQ sweeps, up and down, looking for the exact frequency. And you might identify with replaying the same 8 bars over and over and thinking, am I doing this right? Will it ruin my mix? And the worst part is, you can end up making the mix worse, not better, simply because you couldn't trust the first decision that you made. Now this comes from your fear of missing something. FOMO, maybe, I don't know. But when you're unsure about what sounds good or bad, you just don't fully trust your ears and you start hunting for problems and doubting every move you make. I've seen it where they're not sure what they're listening for or whether something actually sounds bad and need fixing. So they'll go boosting EQs and looking for things that sound bad, but the problem is they don't know what sounds bad. I've got a kick drum here that I've made sound a little bit muddy. This is what I see people doing. People open an EQ plugin and they'll create a bell and they'll just start hunting for the exact frequency. And there's really no need to do that. You know that it's a muddy frequency or it has a muddy tone, so you know you need to be looking in the low mids, which is round down here somewhere. So this is how I often will just EQ something, and that's just grabbing and pulling to remove a muddy frequency. I don't care what the frequency actually is, I just care of the result. Okay, so I'm not even thinking about what the frequency is. I'm listening and just going for something that feels tighter. In the context of the kit is the important thing, how it sounds with the rest of the drums. So let's just bypass that for a second. And then bring in the cut. So the cuts remove the muddiness, and I didn't need to know the exact frequency of the mud to do that. So it's important to make these decisions in the context of at least the instrument group that you're working in. That way you know exactly how much to cut or to boost when you're using EQ. So let's listen to this kick drum in the context of the drums, and I'll just pull out some mud. Okay, and you can see as I was kind of moving that frequency around, it wasn't making a huge difference to the result. So it really doesn't matter. You don't have to find the exact frequency and waste time and overthink cutting or boosting with EQ. Context being everything, we've listened to it with the drum kit. It would make sense now to listen to it with the bass guitar. Let's quickly do that. And then without the EQ, yes, I'm pleased with that. Tightened up the low end mix there between the drums and bass without overthinking where to cut. These decisions can always be fine-tuned as the mix progresses when you start layering in the other instruments. Nothing's fixed in stone. Don't overthink it. Just move on to the next element, knowing you can always come back and change it. It doesn't have to be perfect. So how do you break that loop? It starts with intentional listening before you touch a single control. Ask yourself, does this actually sound bad or am I just guessing? And then make your move and move on. Don't judge it until you hear it in the full context of the mix. This is really important. Every decision you make should pass the in-context test. And if it disappears in the mix, so should your urge to fix it. If something isn't fixed after moving on, you'll hear it on repeated listens as you work through other elements in your song. So don't think you have to get it perfect first time. You'll be surprised how often that problem just simply disappears as you work through the mix. Which brings us to the next big problem, the mental clutter that slows down every decision you make. Picture this, you're about to compress a vocal and your plugin folder is a mile long. Which one do you choose? You try one, then another, and half an hour later, you're still not sure you've picked the best one. Now multiply that by every single decision in your mix and you can see how fast your creative energy evaporates. And when you don't have a clear workflow, that just gets even worse. You jump from drums to vocals to guitars in a random order, trying new tricks as you go, hoping it will work. So instead of deleting half your plugins to shorten that list and losing a whole day, choose your limits and stick to them. It requires a bit of discipline, but I believe in you. Now that could mean don't buy any new plugins until you've finished 20 mixes. It could be for the next 6 mixes, only use plugins you've bought but have not used yet. Or create a favourites list in your DAW. Some DAWs make this easier to do than others, so try your best to do this. But say pick 3 EQs, a handful of different types of compressors, 2 reverbs, 2 delays, a saturator, a tape machine, and a couple of channel strip plugins. And maybe 3 specialist tools like Soothe 2 or Neutron, or, something that does something unique that nothing else does. So you end up with, 15 or 20 plugins in your favourites list to help you make the decision faster and to make fewer decisions. If your DAW doesn't offer that favourites feature, you could create a mix template only with those favourite plugins pre-populated in the tracks that you then recall for every mix. I create dummy tracks that I call placeholders to store my favourites for quick access. Once you've picked your limits, commit to it and only use those tools for at least 5 to 10 mixes. You'll shrink your decision pool without deleting anything, and you'll actually get to know those plugins inside out. And if you get bored of a plugin, just swap it out for another. Don't add it, just swap it out. For a workflow to stick, it needs to be your own and not someone else's. You must understand why you're doing something to get the result you're after. For example, start with drums next to the bass to build the mix's rhythm section and the foundation, and then add the guitars, keys and synths around them until the mix comes together as a cohesive instrumental before adding the vocals. Now that's what I do, but it might not work for you. Alternatively, you could add the vocals sooner if you struggle to find space for them so late in the process. Systematically work through each group of instruments, fixing problems first and then enhancing them. And you'll see me do this over and over on the channel and in my masterclasses. And that's my workflow. Take parts of workflows from other people you follow and combine them in a way that makes sense to you. This is really important. If you don't understand something, don't use it. This next step will help you kick one of the worst habits that leads to amateur sounding mixes. You've probably seen it happen. Someone loads up a session, pushes a few faders for a couple of minutes, and immediately reaches for an EQ or a compressor or some fancy plugin they've just bought. It feels like progress. You're doing something straight away. But here's the problem. If you skip the basic static mix, you're building on a shaky foundation and you end up solving balance problems with processing instead of faders and panning, and that leads to overprocessing. Overprocessing makes tracks sound harsh, unnatural, phasey and brittle. They sound flat and lifeless and can sound like they have a veil over them. There have been numerous occasions where I've asked a student to bypass all their plugins on a track for it to instantly sound better. Balance issues that could have been fixed with a simple fader move get buried under layer after layer of processing, and the mix starts sounding cluttered and congested before it's even started. So what's the alternative? Well, I'm glad you asked that. Spend 20 to 30 minutes just on volume and panning before touching any plugin. You'll be surprised how close to finished it already sounds. How loud something is in a mix directly impacts on its tone and quality. So spending time here means fewer plugins down the line. Fewer plugins mean less chance of creating that harsh, brittle sound that is really the telltale giveaway to an amateur mix. Now, if you're not sure how to do a static mix, the importance of it, then my static mix mini course walks you through it step by step. It's linked in the description so you can follow along and get your balance right before touching a single plugin. But even with a solid start, you still need to know where you're headed. But how do you do that? You open the session, push a few faders, twist a few knobs, and hope something clicks. You might have a sound in your head, but you're not sure how to get there. And once you start messing with plugins, you lose that sound and feel completely lost. And this is where reference tracks can really help. Think of your reference track as your sat-nav. And without it, you're relying on memory and guesswork, which is fine until you realise you're 200 miles away from where you were meant to be. And when you mix without references, you're guessing at what finished should sound like. You might land close, or you might end up way off without realising it until you play it somewhere else. And this is why mixes can sound great in your room, but unbalanced everywhere else. Choose 2 or 3 reference tracks before you start mixing. Compare your mix to them at key moments to keep your perspective and know when you've actually crossed the finish line. With more experience, you'll need to go to references less and less. For me, they keep me drifting away from the client's brief, because as one decision impacts the next, your mix can quickly get off course without regular check-ins on the reference. So it's really easy to do this. I recommend this plugin, MetchKB from Plugin Alliance, to seamlessly switch between tracks. It level matches them to your mix, so you can make really accurate decisions. You can also compare the frequency balance between the mix and your reference.
What the hell is going on all around the globe?
And it has these EQ bands down here, so you can really zoom in on problem areas and do some listening tests and comparisons. I did a video recently about using reference tracks to unstick your mix, so I'll put a link to that in the description. And finally, the habit that keeps more mixers stuck in limbo than anything else. When you have a belief that all pro mixers are perfect, or you fear making mistakes in case you get something wrong, you end up stuck on tiny details no one will ever notice. You work on the same snare hit for 15 minutes. You keep rebalancing the backing vocals in a section, or you zoom into one bar of the song and live there for half an hour. It feels like you're getting closer to perfect, but the truth is perfection is subjective. It's a moving target. The problem here is that the more time you spend in the minute details, the harder it is to zoom out and hear the song as a whole, and you lose emotional perspective. So what's the cure for this? If you feel this is a particularly bad problem for you, then set a time limit for each section. Once you feel it's 90% there or 85% there, move on. Be brave. Push through it. If you're not sure what you've done is working, just still move on. If there's a real problem, like I suggested earlier, trust that it will reveal itself the next time you listen with fresh ears. When you think you're getting into this loop of perfectionism, stop and take a break. Come back and listen to the mix from the top and don't stop until you get to the end. Resist the urge to start working on something. Make a note on a notepad on your desk or something of anything that you notice during that listen through. And this is the quickest way I know of to get back to your perspective and discover if that thing that you thought needs fixing actually does. Rick Rubin said about perfectionism, "Perfectionism gets in the way of fun. A more skillful goal might be to find comfort in the process, to make and put out successive works with ease." So just keep finishing mixes and starting new ones. It's the best way to improve your listening skills and make decisions easier and grow as a mixer. Every one of these habits is a decision trap. The more of them you fall into, the more your mental clarity drains away. Break them and you'll mix faster, trust your ears sooner, and enjoy the process again. If you want a complete start to finish static mix workflow that will help you avoid many of these traps, check out my static mix mini course. I'll link to it in the description. And I've deliberately left out one very popular bad habit. And what do you think it is? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious to see your answers. So now you know how to break the habits that are keeping you stuck. But here's the thing. If you don't have a workflow you can follow every single time, you're going to slide straight back into overwhelm. And that's why I want you to watch this video next, and I'll walk you through building your own mix template so you can streamline your entire process, cut out all those wasted decisions, and mix with more intention and mental clarity. Plus, I'll give you a free template you can download and start using right away. That's all from me, and I'll see you in the next video.